Hello everyone, welcome to this Year 10 Science stream. I'm hoping that I can see all of you, or I can't actually see all of you, but that you can all see me, see the whāinga that we've got for today, see the slides, and possibly even hear my sounds being transmitted online as we are in our virtual classroom here, at the virtual Selwyn College, or with our virtual science materials and our virtual whiteboard, all those sorts of things. Can I just get you, please, to sign off in the chat if everything is coming through all good, just to check that it's all working, that it's okay, that you can hear what I'm saying. Just in the meantime, while you're doing that, just so you know, everything in this will be recorded. So if you want to review this in future, it'll be there for you to have a little bit of a look at the end, or at some other point. So we're going to go through all of the content that's in your slides for this week. Hopefully that will clarify any issues that you may have. While we're going through that, you're welcome to ask questions in the live chat, or to post them as comments below, and I'll happily try and answer them as we're going through. If I miss anything, or you have any additional questions, we'll have a Google Meet on Friday. That'll be in our 5th period class at 2:10 p.m. We'll try and keep that one reasonably succinct. So we'll answer any questions that anyone has, and then we'll do a bit of a Kahoot. Okay, can I just get you to say in the chat if you can hear me? Just a thumbs up is fine. My Year 9s this morning were all posting emoji, which apparently means that they're in good spirits. I just want to double check that everything is coming through clear. It's a little bit, might be a little bit choppy, a little bit laggy. That could be because my little computer's trying its darndest to do what it needs to do. So I'm sorry if that is the case. Hopefully the sound should be coming through clearly though. Just double check the chat, see what we're saying. Might be a touch laggy. You can hear me? Okay, fantastic. All right, good to know, team. All right, what we're going to do is I'll dive through the slides for this week. As we're going through, I'll keep flicking back to the chat. And if you've got any questions, you can ask me there. Okay, let's look at the Te Rautaki Te Wiki for this week. First thing was that pre-test. You will have noticed when Miss Garlick put up those documents, she also put up a little Google form. If you could complete that, please, that would be greatly appreciated. This is our way of looking at what you already know and making sure we adjust our teaching according to that. It also lets us know if our teaching's doing anything, because at the end, when you do your final test, we can look at your results before and your results after and see how you did. The content that we're going to be going through today is going to be on levels of organisation, but you can see that the whāinga there as well. We're looking at the differences between animal cells and plant cells, as well as organelles, what they do. That's the little cellular organs that do various jobs, and we'll have a little kōrero about that in a moment. Okay, let's move on to lesson 1. So in lesson 1, you'll notice that there was that Year 10 Living World pretest. That was your only mahia. In case you wanted a joke, I saw this the other day. Y equals mx plus c jokes are great, but at some point we've got to draw the line. I thought that was pretty good. It's a little bit dry, but hopefully that livened your moods like it did mine on this somewhat rainy morning. Okay, let's dive into the content, get through it as quickly as possible. Spare you of any more of Mr. Wills's terrible jokes. Okay, levels of organisation. So, in our bodies, we have a variety of levels in which our various parts of ourselves are organised, and we give each level its own name, so we can sort of figure out whether we're looking at the whole organism, or looking at cells, or looking at somewhere in between. And in particular, what we're looking at today is those levels in between. Now, you'll know what cells are. You'll know that they're the building blocks of organisms, of all things that are living are made up of cells. And those cells tend to have various parts, and we're going to learn about those parts today. or just refresh if we've already got that prior knowledge. Now, a layer of the same type of cell we call a tissue. So if you have your skin and you look at your skin, you'll notice that you have various layers of skin, and each layer of those is a tissue, right? And your skin has different layers, a whole bunch of layers stacked on top of each other. We call the collection of all those different layers an organ. So skin is the largest organ in the human body, but you have a whole bunch of other organs that do various things, and some of those organs even work together. So for example, your stomach couldn't work without your esophagus, which couldn't work without your small and large intestine, which couldn't work without all the other parts that make up your digestive system, right? And so we need to know those components and how they work together. And the easiest way to look at that is to show you a diagram, something like this. So in this diagram, you can see we go right the way from a little baby cell all the way up, all the way up to a whole organism, which is pretty cool. Now that whole organism level, if we're like a biologist, maybe we care, or we're studying that tissue level, maybe we're studying the organ system level. We just need to be able to communicate which level we're looking at when we're having a kōrero with somebody else about the parts of the body. So if you've got that, that's sweet as. Let's move on to the next thing. Now you'll notice that the way that we're structuring these slides for you is we've got some content and then we're following it up with some questions. Now these slides this week were put together by the excellent Miss Fasolo. So she's put in some questions which will really test your thinking. Hopefully you're up for the challenge. So you'll see there's a paragraph there with some blanks in there. Cells are the basic building blocks that make up all living. What could it be? Could it be organism? Maybe. That would be a nice biological word. A layer of the same type of cells are known as you hopefully will be able to get that from that levels of organization page, right? Whereas layers of different cells which work together do a common task is called again, you'll be able to get it from that page, right? So the idea is that each of those blanks can be filled in with the information you've already got. Now you should be able to think of some examples of human body systems. We already talked about the digestive system, so that's one example. What other systems can you think of? You can sound them off in the chat if you want to give each other answers to those questions. For example, what system is involved in pumping blood? It contains your heart, it contains all of your veins, which bring blood back to the heart, or your arteries, which take blood away. It involves your capillaries, which are the little tubes that connect them, that are nice and small and thin to allow for diffusion of oxygen across, and then of carbon dioxide back. It also links to, of course, your lungs, where the oxygen and carbon dioxide can be exchanged, right? So that's all part of one system. You might think of when you pinch yourself or you get hurt, there's a signal that's sent to your brain through nerves, isn't there? So that has a name as well, that system. But whatever ones you can think of, maybe you think of your bones, for example, and all the bone cells that together make up that system. If in doubt, give it a quick Google. I'm sure you'll be fine. Okay. Name each of the human body systems below. Now you've got one that's got the mouth, the esophagus, the stomach. Have we already talked about it today? We have. That's the digestive system. Very good. You've got two other ones there, which hopefully you can recognize. One of them is a whole bunch of things that are involved in breathing. Ooh. What do we call that? What's the scientific word for that? I'll tell you, it begins with R. Respiration. Okay, there you go. Third one, we've already talked about it. You should be able to get that. If you want the scientific name, it's on possibly even the next slide. This one here. Oh my goodness, maybe there's some answers in there for us. The key thing with this slide is about putting in what are some of the major organs that are involved. Now, sometimes there's a whole bunch of organs, right? But we're talking about the main ones, right? So you should be able to figure out which organs are involved in the respiratory system, okay? And which ones are involved in the excretory system. You should also be able to think about, what is the muscular system for? Musculoskeletal system, right? What is the digestive system for? I'm sure that you can figure this one out and pop those in. Now, that brings us to the end of lesson 1. that'll be pretty straightforward. Our hope is that this takes you no longer than an hour to complete for each of those lessons, right? We don't want you working for too long. The idea is that over the course of the week, you're spending no more than the amount of time you would normally spend in science, working on both your Google Meets or live streams in our case, and working through those slides. And I'm just going to quickly flick back to the chat. If anyone's got any questions from the last or from that first lesson, you can post them here. Sorry if it sounds a little bit echoey. My little baby computer is trying to do its best to keep up the stream, and I'm sorry if it's not able to do that. So if it ends up not working out super well, one thing that's good is that there will be a recording of this available for you to view at the end and go through in your own time. Now, you don't have to go through it. You can go through it at your own pace. So I'm sorry about that if it is a little bit choppy and that sort of thing. I can't see any questions, but if you've got any, you're welcome to post them in, and I'll make sure I flick back to the chat later on for your review. Okay, we're going to go into lesson 2. Excellent. By the way, if you're coming in late, that's okay. Just sign off in the chat. I'll review those logs later on today and make sure that I mark you as present. I'm hoping that we can figure out a good way to do that. Then I can tell the people back at school that you're here. Okay, lesson 2, animal versus plant cells. We're going to explore and communicate those differences. What are cells? That's your mahia. It's your opportunity to give a little explanation. Try and do it in your own words, but when you're ready to check your answer, you'll be able to see on the next page, yeah, there's a little bit of a definition for you provided there for you to check your answer, right? Cells are the microscopic building blocks that make up all living organisms. That's a nice way of thinking about it. And then we list, a few of the parts that you might typically find in a cell. Remember, not all cells, though, have a nucleus, right? Some cells are a little bit funkier than others. And we'll talk about that today. Speaking of which, we've got 2 big classifications here to be thinking about, right? Most of the cells that you think of when you think of cells will be what we call eukaryotes, eukaryotes, right? Now, eukaryotes are multicellular organisms, right? Like us, like animals, like plants, right? But way back in the day, a far distant ancestor was a cell that split in 2, and one group went off and became the prokaryotes, right? Which are much more similar, I guess, to that original particular cell, where they don't have a defined nucleus, and those would be our sort of bacteria, our protists, and our archaea. You kind of get where archaea comes from because it's really old, like it's old school. But our eukaryotes developed the ability to be able to hang out in large groups and be able to work together with one another and specialize in different ways. So eukaryotic organisms, like you and me, are multicellular. We have a whole bunch of cells working in harmony. And we need to know that difference because it's really important to understand that not all organisms are multicellular, right? So we have that classification there. Within our eukaryotes, we have some further delineations, right? We have our plants and we have our animals. And what makes them different? Well, both are multicellular, right? And both have distinct nuclei, right? They have like a membrane around them that keeps all the DNA intact, keeps those instructions, the code for life, all in one place, right? They also have organelles, which is kind of like your organs in your body. They all do different things, except they're on the inside of the cell, so they're very tiny. And so we put the L suffix on the end. E-L-L-E in Latin means like tiny. So they're little organs, right, for these cells. So we call them organelles. These organelles are specialized and have membranes around them, keeping them very distinct in their local environment so that they can do their jobs more effectively. And all these different organelles do different jobs, right? And you might know some of the various organelles that make up these cells. For some of you, you might already know that plants tend to have these things called cell walls. Tough, thick exteriors that help them for protection, right? They also have, they also allow them to be like more rigid, which allows plants to withstand damage, such as the sort of heavy rain that we're getting outside. Plants also have chloroplasts, which they use for photosynthesis, which is why they're green. And we'll talk more about photosynthesis in a later lesson. Plants also have these very large vacuoles, right? And a vacuole is a big, essentially bag, which the plant can fill with usually water or nutrients, ready for use at various times. Animal cells tend not to have these large vacuoles because they have other systems, other ways of being able to be strong and stable. And you can think about that as like your bones, right? You don't need these vacuoles like plants do, because plants unfortunately don't have bones, right? So they need these other systems in place. Those are the major differences between them. Now, Ms. Fasolo's done an excellent job of putting a video that helps cover those key differences, and that will help you to answer these couple of questions. First thing in here, what's the difference between a prokaryote and a eukaryote? Now, there's an image down there to help you, but we went through that on that slide, right? We talked about the differences between the two, and so that information is there. But if you know any other information because you've done your own reading, you're welcome to have a little review. There's also a more challenging task here for you. This one is about similarities and differences between plants and animal cells. Now, your job is to list some of the similar things. What are the same organelles that they share? Why do we think of them as similar? Maybe you think back to that stuff that you wrote on the slide just before. And then we also want you to write what's different about them. What organelles do plant cells have that animal cells do not? And once you've done that, that's the end of lesson 2. So I'm going to quickly check back onto the chat. Hopefully it's still not too choppy and it's all going okay. If anyone has any questions, now would be an excellent time to post them into the chat. I can't see any major questions coming up, but I'll keep looking at it for a second. And if you've got any, you can post them there, and I'll do my best to answer. If you don't, if you aren't able to post that question right now, that is totally okay. You can review this video, or you can bring those questions along to our Google Meet on Friday, 5th period. That's at 2:10 p.m. Okay, let's move on to lesson 3 and get you out of here reasonably soon. Okay? All right, question 3. What's the key difference between plant and animal cells? Surely we know this. You've answered that in the previous thing. You're looking at those differences between those organelles. You're looking at, well, some have a cell wall, right? Those plants have a cell wall. They have chloroplasts. They have large vacuoles. That's the key thing we want you to be getting. Animal cells also have a variety of differences, and there's more detail that you can know here. But if you know that level of detail, you know that plants have cell walls, chloroplasts, and very large vacuoles, you're crushing it. Well done. Now, this video is an excellent little video that dives into different organelles and what they do. And I encourage you to spend some time reviewing this on your own. I won't show it here, but there's a list of organelles that we'd like you to know. And you can count them there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 major organelles we need you to know, right? We've got the cell membrane, which is the outside of the cell, lovely barrier from the outside, which controls entry and exit, right? What things go in, what things go out, all that sort of thing. Your nucleus contains all the DNA, that's the instructions for life. All the instructions get read from there, and then that controls what all of the cell, various organelles and what all of the parts of the cell do. You've got the cytoplasm, that big sort of thick, goopy liquid that is on the inside of the cell, filled with nutrients and the various bits and bobs that all of the organelles need in order to do their jobs. You've got the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, which converts the food that we're eating into energy for the cell. We'll talk more about the mitochondria in the weeks to come. We've got endoplasmic reticulum, which might be a new word, so practice saying it slow. Endoplasmic reticulum, right? Reticulum. Job of the ER, as it's sometimes referred to, is to transport protein and substances around the cell. So when various molecular machines or proteins get made, or various substances get made, it's the job of the ER to move them around to where they should be. Chloroplasts, now remember, that's only in plant cells. Their job is to take sunlight and convert it into energy for the plant to use, right? Or convert it really into foods that the plants can then access for energy, right? So that process we call photosynthesis. We'll talk about it in a later lesson. Lastly, we've got vacuoles. Vacuoles store nutrients and water for later use, and depending on which plant they are, they'll vary greatly in size. Now, we also want you to know a little bit about what these things look like so you can identify them. You notice the questions for this lesson are all about identifying the parts of these organelles. Now, this might be a little bit tricky, but let's see if we can work through them. I'll give you some of the answers as we're going through here. So you can see this arrow is pointing towards this layer on the outside, right? What type of cell do we think this is? Well, it's green. That might give us a hint, but we can see these stacked layers here. We know they're not mitochondria because the mitochondria, we tend to put a little wiggle on the inside here. So anyway, mitochondria would be the answer for this one here. This one here, it's green, right? Stacked layers. It's a chloroplast, right? Its job is to do photosynthesis. Now that we got that, we know that this is a plant cell, which they've already told us up here. But because we know it's a plant cell, we know that there's not just a cell membrane, but a cell wall. And the cell wall is on the outside of the cell membrane, right? Its job is around structure and stability, and so we can label those two parts, cell wall, cell membrane. We've got something here which looks a little bit funky, but we remember that we have some various parts to our cell, so hopefully we can identify what this is. And we see a very large opening in here, possibly filled with lots of water and nutrients. What could that be? Well, I'll let you figure that one out. Okay, now we've got a couple of images of animal cells, or we've got one image of animal cells. So what our job here is to go through this diagram and figure out all the various components, same as we did last time. Now, hopefully remember that the center of our cell, we've got an encapsulated nucleus in our animal and plant cells that holds our DNA. Hopefully we can identify our mitochondria. They've drawn it there in blue. Usually a mitochondria is drawn as kind of like a little sausage with a squiggle on the inside. That is part of how it works, is to do with its structure. So we'll talk more about that at a later stage. We remember ER being located somewhere in here, possibly could be this rough thing around here. But what I'll do is I'll leave that for you to finish. Now, you might see the occasional yellow slide in your slides. Yellow slides in this particular format and for the way that we're going to be progressing for the rest of the term, yellow slides delineate that it's an optional piece of content, right? It's designed to extend you if you'd like to do it. This particular piece of content is around muscle cells and looking at how the size and shapes of different cells relates to their function. And if you want to, you can have a little bit of a look. There's a whole bunch of different types of animal cells depending on what they do. The cells in your eyes, the cells other places all look different. So I'll leave that up to you. Now that pretty much brings us to the end of the slides for today, right? For our reflection and revision lesson, we'll be doing that on Friday as our Kahoot, which will be good fun. But what I'd like you to have a little bit of a think about is these 4 questions. We're going to call this the hurita, or the reflection task for week 5. And what I want you to be able to do is to be able to look at these and go, I could answer these straight away. If you can, fantastic. You've nailed the content for this week, and you should be ready for next week's work. If you've got any questions about this sort of thing, take some time to do some revision, and if you're still worried, bring those questions to our Google Meet or post them in the chat or the comments below, and we'll go through them in our own time. Now, I'm sure you've all got important work or lunch to be eating or doing right now. So I'm just going to check the chat. If you've got any final questions, you can post them there. I'm I'm keeping an eye out. But if there's nothing more, I'll hang around for a couple of minutes to answer things in the chat. But to the rest of you, have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you all on Friday.